Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this session again. So today what we are discussing is to talk about AWS Lambda function URLs. So recently, AWS has released a new functionality to support AWS Lambda functions with the URLs to it. So whenever you provision your AWS Lambda functions, you have an option to make that particular Lambda function to be triggered using an URL. In this session, what we'll cover is we'll take a very pretty basic example, and with that example, we'll cover what is the main functionality of how we can use Lambda function URLs into our microservices environment. Okay, so here is the high-level design document. What I'm doing is I created a simple microservice application which basically does a web scraping from a real estate website. And after the data is being captured from by this Lambda function, all we are doing is printing that information into a CloudWatch logs. So how does this Lambda function getting triggered is using a Lambda function URL. Before this feature was introduced, we used to use an API gateway URL. Now we are doing a AWS Lambda function URL that basically covers us to trigger the Lambda function using a URL. Okay, so let's go into the prerequisites of what is required for us to implement this change. Of course, we are all provisioning this whole infrastructure using CDK. So for CDK, we need a Node.js and we need a VS Code, which is an optional for us. And we need a CDK and CLI. And CLI also has to be configured with your AWS account. And the reason why we need a Docker because our Lambda function, the microservice, is Dockerized. So now let's provision the infrastructure in our AWS account. So for doing that, the first step that we need to do is npm install CDK synth now. So CDK synth is a functionality that you can use before you even provision the infrastructure. This helps us to create an CloudFormation template using CDK. Okay, so let's go to the actual folder structure. How does it look like? So we have executed two commands. One is npm install that basically adds a new folder called node modules. Okay, and this one is a CDK output which basically coming through CDK commands. So CDK deploy will help us to provision the infrastructure in an AWS account. But before it provisions the infrastructure, it will allow you to review the changes that it is going to create. So these are the changes that it's going to create, right? So all you need to do is click yes, and this is creating your CloudFormation change set. So while this is provisioning, so what we can do is we'll walk you through the folder structure, how it is created. So this is a CDK generator folder structure, a bin folder, a lib folder, and a bunch of CDK related files, right? So let me go to the folder and show you how does it looks like. This is basically creating a Lambda function, okay? And also an additional functionality called add function URL. This is the core piece of this demo. What we are doing is apart from creating a Lambda function, we are also adding an additional functionality called add function URL. And since we need to trigger our URL through a browser, that's the reason I enabled course with allow origin start. So you could specify exactly where to do it, but there are a lot of other functionalities for this particular configuration. I put a documentation in the readme file. Feel free to go through that. Go to the resource folder and see our actual microservice. So this is my Lambda function, right? Pretty much straightforward. All it is doing is calling out this URL and print and getting the HTML from that particular URL and filtering out few divs and also IDs from that particular HTML and getting extracting a text from that particular HTML file. Okay, the CDK deploy command has been successful, and as an output, it also created a Lambda function URL for us. And before we execute this Lambda function, what we're going to do is we go to the AWS console and validate the changes and review the resources that it has created. Okay, so it has created an IAM role, IAM policy, a Lambda function, and also Lambda function URL. So click on the Lambda function. Okay, so this is my Lambda function looks like. And if you see here, you should be seeing a function URL here. So before we execute this particular Lambda function URL, what we're going to do is we'll quickly check configurations. So it has that function URL here. You can use the complete details of what does it looks like. Right now I put a course as asterisk, but once you make more configuration changes, you'll see a lot of other configurations enabled here. So let's go ahead and click this URL, which will basically, you're triggering that particular Lambda function, right? Using a URL. And this is an expected result for you of having a null here. So now we go back to the Lambda function and see the CloudWatch logs. So this is my CloudWatch logs. I go ahead and click on this one. And if you see the data here, right? So what we're expecting, a price and a city. So this is exactly what it has printed, right? So the whole point here is I am triggering my Lambda function using a Lambda function URL. I hope this gives you some clarity and some idea about where to use this Lambda function URL. So feel free to post your comments so that I would know how you are implementing your Lambda function URL in your microservices. Thanks again. Happy coding.